Camaros for the 50th anniversary all week, so it's not a bad gig.
Well, we'll talk more about the Genesis and the Porsches later in the show, but what we've got to let everybody know right now is we've got two special guests in the studio right now. Logan Lawson is the owner of Camaro #1, and I mean #1, right, Logan?
Yeah, #1.
This is the first Camaro ever built in the history of the world.
Yeah, very first.
And there's a great story behind it, but we've got to let everybody know, too, that we've got Mark Gessler, the president of the Historic Vehicle Association, with us. Back. You've been on our television show, but I don't think you've been on this one too.
Yeah, we were here last year with the story of going across the United States in a Model T.
In a Model T, right? Great having you here too, Mark. So Logan, what's this whole thing? Camaro #1, first #1. I got to ask you, how old are you?
I'm 18 now.
18 years old now. Yeah. And you found out about Camaro #1. You heard, tell us the story. How does this start?
So 13
years old.
Yeah, I was 13 years old, coming up on my first car, wanting to find my first car, and was cruising after school on message boards and stuff, looking for new cars, and I came across a thread. It was a verification thread. Some guy in Oklahoma, Yukon, Oklahoma, or no, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, had come across N100001.
The VIN,
and he had the car, and he had the VIN number, but he didn't have any proof. He didn't have any proof that it was the very first. He just had a hunch. And I talked to my dad, and he called the guy, and then the guy called back, and he just raced down there to verify the car. We had history and automotive history before all this happened, and so he went down, and he noticed that there was just a lot of telltale signs about this car that just had to be, since it was very first, they hadn't completely finished beaten out all the details on the assembly line. So we took a chance, and
bought the car.
Yeah, that's where everything started.
Now wait a minute, I'm intrigued. 13 years old, and you're already looking for a car.
Yeah, I grew up with cars. I'm a gearhead. I was just like, I was looking for one.
You're already driving at 13.
Yeah, Dad was taking me out on country roads. I'm from Kansas, so.
Well, you're lucky that your dad was doing that, because I was driving when I was 13, but my dad had no clue what was happening.
So, yeah. So we took the car home, and we put it in storage, and we started 2 years of research to try to find proof that it was the #1, because it wasn't as easy as just calling Heritage Center and being like, hey, here's the VIN number. What do you guys have? No, all the history was pretty much lost on it. And
when you say the Heritage Center, this is GM Heritage Center, which is sort of the repository of all history things with GM now.
They didn't have anything on the car. And so we had to just kind of start digging in, and we did 2 years of tracking down all 50 years of the car. And with that, we uncovered the pilot program, which was the pilot prototype program that Norwood did in secrecy when they were still trying to figure out what they even were going to call the Camaro.
Now, so Norwood, of course, is the name of the assembly plant that built. Norwood, Ohio, built the first plant to build Camaros. There were other plants later that
Van Nuys followed right after.
Van Nuys, California, right. So you're saying they were building cars?
They were, so 49 were built in secrecy in the back of Norwood in an old World War II storage hangar, it's just like storage building. And they revamped the building, and they brought in guys, and they started on the 49 builds that they would reassemble, unassemble, reassemble. The whole purpose of the program was to learn the process so that they could teach the assembly line. And so, starting with #1, inline 6, 3-on-tree, no options. Everyone asks, why an inline 6? It's a Camaro, and you should have a V8 in it. No, inline 6 because it's the most basic configuration you could have. Start with something easy, and then throughout the 49 that they built, they started ramping up the options, started getting into 327s, 350s, all the options, dual exhaust, air conditioning, everything, and so.
So, Mark, you must be intrigued by this, head of the Historic Vehicle Association. I'm intrigued by this 49 build, you said, pre-production?
Yeah.
How does that work, Mark? Is this anything that you had run across before?
Well, the Camaro program seemed to be really special in terms of just the secrecy behind it, which was completely unlike what Mustang was doing by contrast. I mean, you know, Ford was out there teasing the marketplace with Mustang 1, Mustang 2, and, you know, they were amping it all up. And so, I mean, of course, it came out of the gates like a rocket ship. And, of course, GM's sitting there, okay, well, you know, we need to play in this game too, but we're going to play a little different. We're going to design it, and we're going to keep it under wraps. And it was under wraps. I mean, this car was built back in May of 1966. That's why we're here. 66 on the 67. So it was a 67 model year, built in the middle of 66, and I mean, it was literally this month, August of 1966, that the dealers got together here in Detroit, booked Cadillac Hotel, still standing there downtown, and that's when it got revealed to the dealers. And within a month, September, I think 29th, a month later, you could buy one in your showroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was, as you say, it was different than the Mustang program. I mean, Chevy was really caught out by Mustang. They were promoting the what was the rear engine, the Corvair. That was their sporty car. They didn't really take this idea serious of a pony car, and all of a sudden, Mustang comes out of the gates and sells almost 1 million in the first 18 months. I mean, 1 million of these things. Can you imagine that? 1 million pony cars going off the line at Ford. And so, the Chevy program is really a crash program, isn't it? I mean, as you got into the car, I mean, what did you see in the car? I mean, one of the stories of the development of this car is it's sort of half body on frame and half unibody, right?
Yeah.
The way it's constructed.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty much exactly what you're saying. So it's like unibody, and we're looking at the car, all the pieces were marked, hand-built, prototype. You know, they were working directly with Fisher Body, and they were really close. So anything that needed changed, they just tell Fisher Body, half a day later, just ship it back. And they were beating out all the details in the process.
So in today's world, you know, automakers will build what they call pre-production cars. Yeah. And it's not the mules that are tested out at the proving ground. These are built in the assembly plant, you know, production intent. And these days they'll build like 150 cars, and then they'll get them into the hands of employees and dealers and all that for fast feedback, find any kind of problems or anything like that. And when that program's done, they're crushed, and that's that.
Yeah.
But you're saying you've got your hands on what really is kind of a pre-production car car number one, and it ended up for sale.
Yeah, so what you're talking about, the mules and stuff, the mules were also part of the 49. So like a certain amount of the 49 were sales convention cars, a certain amount were mules, a certain amount went on road trips to California. For development. Yeah, and that's when they figured out axle hop, and they had to change all that on the SS. And so the sales convention cars, they were required with show paint, and they had number one was it had a static lighting display. You plug it into 110, and they could flash all the lights to music. And so at the hotel where it was unveiled, it had a static lighting display. We have a film that is VIN number specific for when it was unveiled at the sales convention, and showing all the lights flashing, and it's pretty cool. So
yeah, I'm kind of knocked out about this. That what's clearly a development car. This one was not a mule, though.
No.
And just so if people don't know, mules that's the inside industry jargon. That's the car that you take out and beat the hell out of on the test track.
Yeah. No, so sales convention cars, they and the build, the body tags, they were all manipulated by the IBM. They manipulated the IBM computer so that they would be actually able to sell them. They would get past legal. And so, once the sales convention cars were done, the dealers had the option to get them. And so, some of the biggest dealers, like RTR, is the first owner of a number one, also 36, also 49. He requested number one. He saw the significance of number one, and so he got 3 cars right off the sales convention cars. So theoretically, he could be the very first Camaro collector ever. So
yeah, it's interesting because 50 years removed, we all look at these cars as icons, but at the time, this is a crash program. I've got a Porsche 908, which has become an iconic Porsche racing car. But same thing, in the 60s, when Porsche was racing, I mean, these were crash one-year programs to try to get these things out the door. And my car was crashed in its first race by Porsche. Goes into the privateer market, and it's really hard to track down its provenance, where it gets handed down. I mean, how did you piece that together? When you got this car, it had no engine in it, right?
Oh no, it had an engine.
It had an engine.
It had an engine.
Yeah.
So, well, we kind of get into that. That's later into the history, but so. I mean, tracking down the provenance, I mean, it had several owners. So it went from RTRs used it as a selling point, had it right in the middle of his showroom, and he would just use it to bring in people and to sell the 67 Camaro, 68 Camaro. And then he had it for about 2.5 years, and then after that, he sold it to a family friend that I went to church with, Linda Sue Johnson, and then she drove it and then sold it to Alvis Harper, which was the father of the captain of the football team, straight A student. He needed a car, and then unlucky enough, Alvis, his son, or his adopted son, because Alvis couldn't have kids, he talked his dad into getting him a high performance car because the inline six wasn't doing enough for him, and unlucky, his son passed away in the new car, and so Alvis, seeing the car in his garage for 6 months, every time he passed it, he just couldn't stand it, and so he just shoveled it off real quick to any guy that would buy it right away, and that was a local race car builder, and the race car builder, so Linda Sue Johnson, Alvis Harper, even the race car builder, they all knew of the significance that it was the very first. And so the race car builder went in, and when he was turning it into an NHRA bracket racer, he stripped all the original parts off of it and saved them. And so when he did that, and then he started racing it, and it was
at that point he put a different drivetrain in.
Did he put a cage in it?
No,
roll bar and all that?
He put big block, put a whole new all new powertrain in it, made it kind of lightweight, saved everything that he took off of it. He saved, he packaged it up, put it in his barn. It wasn't the first car that he had stripped. When we were tracking down all the heritage of this car and finding all the original owners, there was 5 different cars worth of parts that we found in the barn, and he was on his last leg, and to get the parts that we needed, we had to buy the whole barn. And so we've been selling parts that he stripped off.
So wait a minute, you bought the car, and then found out later there's all these original parts.
Yeah. So
how did you make these connections?
Well, we just we knew that we needed to catalog the history of the car, and so we just started with ownership history.
And you had the VIN. I mean,
we had the VIN.
You had the VIN.
Yeah. And so we were able to go to each state. I mean, there was a period of time we were sending out the VIN to every single state in the country. So I'm trying to figure out where it went, and figured out that its whole life was in Oklahoma. And so, but yeah, so we tracked down every single owner. We tracked down, and we went into the ownership really detailed. If they weren't alive, we tracked down their burial site, took pictures of it. We talked to members of their family that were still alive, and I mean, luckily enough, we were able to get to the race car builder before he died. And so we were able to get all the original parts, reunite them with the original body, and then you
had to take the engine out. You had to restore.
Yeah,
restoration.
The car, when we found it, 10 to 15 years bracket racer. I mean, it was in need of restoration. And then when we found all the original parts, we saved most of them, restored them. I mean, they're all really in need of restoration. Besides the body panels and all that stuff, we still. I mean, once we put it through a 4-year restoration, and anything that we couldn't save, we replaced with properly date coded. I mean, everything's original on it. So
yeah.
Well, it's an outstanding piece of research, and that's what attracted us to the whole project, because here you had not only number one, but you also had really a great story of stewardship, the effort, that Corey and his dad and everybody else who was involved put into this project, where we now have a really, really tight record thanks to these guys to really lean on, and where in many cases you don't have that, and it just, so that. And then obviously we had the 50th anniversary, so things came together in a great way to be here on Woodward with the 15th car on the National Historic Vehicle Register.
Mark, how important is a car like this? I mean, you're the guy who's tracking the history of these things.
Well, it's incredibly important in the sense that it's the first, okay? But what's important about it is it represents really an important point in automotive history in America, because it was this car, not this, it's the Camaro that launched really the biggest rivalry that's, among the biggest rivalries in the history of the automotive industry. And it's one that continues to rage today. And if you talk about, I mean, we're out here, we're at Woodward, we're seeing what's happening out here. Everybody identifies with the Camaro Mustang story. And it's part of America. It's a deep part of our culture. It's something that everybody celebrates, and almost everybody's got a connection to. It's part of automobility. It's part of our it's part of who we are. And a car like this, I mean, and the decades that followed, it's deep into American culture and something that we want to celebrate. And when you have an artifact like this, where you can point to it and say, "Oh my goodness, the first one," really, I think it helps people sort of identify with the entire story and their own story. And our whole objective is to bring America's automotive heritage to the American people. And so we put it on display out here at Woodward in a museum-style case, glass case, right next to Woodward for this week. And it's the idea of bringing heritage here, something important that people wouldn't have otherwise seen.
In fact, we've got a time-lapse video that we shot, or had shot, of the car being loaded into its glass box. I guess it's like a trophy case.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Hey, Carmen, let's run that video clip right now.
Okay, so the showcase is right there where Old Woodward meets New Woodward Avenue in Birmingham. So it's right there on display. And before this, it was the National Mall earlier this year, where we had Reagan's Jeep from the Reagan Ranch and the first presidential car in it, right there, right in the middle of the National Mall. So it's a great piece, a great showcase, a great way to really expose just everybody, all ages. And I say it's not just for car guys, although car guys love it. It's also all about sharing it with the American people. So everybody loves it, and it's a great way to share something special. And boy, this is something pretty special.
Yeah. But look, I'm intrigued by the father-son project on this. My father and I have done the same thing and raced historic cars for years. I mean, is this the beginning of a long partnership? I mean, you must have the restoration bug. What's next?
Well, I mean, in finding, so working with GM Heritage, when we unearthed the pilot book, which was kind of like the holy grail of the pilot pilot prototypes like program, it had the build of every single 49 cars, and I mean it told you it was in possession of the pilot coordinator, the person in charge of the whole thing. And so when we found that, we were able to start tracking down. I mean, when we found that, we started working with Heritage, and they were like, well, I mean, you did such a good job on number one. Can you document all 49 cars along with the 3 knockdown copies that they sent to Van Nuys for learning purposes at Van Nuys, since that was another production plant? And so, I mean, in the process of so we were trying to figure out how many cars actually existed today, because you're right. I mean, a lot of them were crushed. I mean, a lot of them were mules, but the sales convention cars got out lucky, and some of them were given to Top Brass. You know, some of them were not. And so along with that, we found that there were about 10 that still existed. All of them have been verified. We made sure that they were real deal, and along with that process, we were able to acquire some of the other pilot prototypes, and so we have other prototypes that are in the lined up for restoration.
Oh, well, that's right. There's about 4 of them, right?
Yes.
What do you got? You got 15?
We have 1, 10. 10 is the sister car of 1, all Granada gold, just like 1, but convertible. And it's the earliest known to exist convertible to exist right now. And then we have 31, which is nothing. The only thing special about it is the pilot prototype. It's red, black, convertible. And then 49. So that's the second prototype Z28 to come out of the engineering garage at GM. And so, those are all lined up. And then so 4 of the 49 were used for. They were ordered omit powertrain, so they were sent off without anything besides just the body, everything on it, and then they were stripped because this was going on right during Lunar Rover kind of GM thing. And in our research, we found out that GM had a tremendous part in the Lunar Rover. I mean, we have more stuff to break later, but I mean, that's another time.
That's right. A lot of people don't know that General Motors was involved in the design of the Lunar Rover.
Is that Lunar Rover, is it a solid rear axle, or is it a rear?
So the 4, they actually stripped it down to meet weight, and they tested reliability test for all the components that ran on the Lunar Rover. And so after that, the 4 cars were then, all the components were taken off and then sent to the engineering garage, the prototype garage, and so 49, prototype Z28, second, and then 28, the Californian factory prep race car, and other ones they were all turned into, the Alexander brothers. They were big on the scene, custom car makers. GM, a lot of they specialized in faux grills, and they were big on the sales convention cars. And they were in charge of 3 of them, along with the Californian. The Californian special because it has a bubble hood. They were advertising the possibility of factory prepped race cars, and so it was. So it has a bubble hood like the Cherokee, the Corvette Cherokee.
No, don't know that either.
So
so
the bubble hood with the Webers underneath. So at the show you could see the Webers because it had a clear bubble on the top of the hood, and so during that time they were advertising all that. So we have prototypes that are coming up and big stories going on with GM involvement in electric car stuff that will break. Hopefully we'll be back to talk to you again.
Cool. No. Hey, we've got a couple of questions coming in from the audience. Armin wants to know, has Chevy ever tried to buy the car back from you?
No, that is a very popular question. And honestly, we got the car completely restored. And then, we were working with GM Heritage, and they've never needed to buy the car from us because they're like, hey, can you be here? And we're like, certainly, yeah. Why not? Why not work with GM on helping showcase this car? And so, 2016 unveil at Belle Isle, Barrett-Jackson, Arizona, during the Kettering donation, the charity car that they sold. And I mean, we're working with GM on this event too. And so they've never really needed to buy the car from us.
Armin also wants to know, would you ever sell it?
I'm hoping to keep it in the family.
I think the price just went up.
Hey, he's got 4 more.
Bob D wants to know, how many of the pre-production 49s are still in existence?
So that's the 10.
The 10,
That's
okay.
the number of the 10 that we've all verified. And I mean, certainly there could be ones that are in trailers that we have not been able to track down, but unlikely because we've been through. I mean, we've worked with FBI. We've definitely been through knocking on all the doors. So.
Steve wants to know, were you a GM guy before all this?
Oh, man. Okay, so if you go to the website and go to About This Site, it's the whole story of me. And there's pictures of me when I'm this tall underneath an original 427 AC Cobra. And so...
So you were not a GM guy?
No, for Shelby.
All right.
No, but... You know, we had to switch gears when we stumbled on this. I mean, one of the biggest things we've grown up with, we really loved race history, and we loved just the provenance of the car. And so when we stumbled on this, I mean, it wasn't like we loved Ford and we didn't like Chevy. It was just more of the story behind the cars. So, I mean, we just kind of switched gears.
Yeah. Mark, how'd you get involved in this effort?
Well, we had learned about the car about a year and a half ago, and I was actually at the Carlisle Nationals, and we sat down and started talking and going through some of the research, and we were just blown away by really the great work, the great stewardship that these guys did together to bring this all together, and with that we started saying, well, let's. We've got a slot for this. We just got to figure out when and what makes the most sense, and when is the opportunity to tell the story to the greatest amount of people, and that's why we're here.
Yeah. Hey, we've got a phone call that's coming in here too. Carmen, let's bring that phone call in.
This is Clem Zarowski in Delmont, Pennsylvania. I just wanted to say that gentleman with that Camaro is extremely lucky because of federal law now. You cannot trace previous owners of cars. A lot of people with collector cars are running into this. For a while there, if now you have to have a case number from the police department before they will release any information. So this gentleman was really, really lucky.
Yeah,
Thanks for the call, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like it was easy. Jamie Schwartz and I, and then a few other of our some of my high school friends helped me out. I needed help, and so more times than not, we got answers saying, "Hey, we can't help you. We can't give you this information." But we just kept on trying, and you would find the people that just liked our story, and they would do it in their free time. I mean, I'm not saying that they were supposed to.
Don't name names.
Yeah, I'm not saying they were supposed to, but they're definitely beneficial to find in history. I mean, you got to have those people. I mean, especially in this kind of circumstance, you got to have the people that will take a chance. And I mean, as Mark points out, the car without the history is just there's not that much there. So
well, the interesting thing on what the caller says is, I find it fascinating that we can find out all the personal information about when your grandparents got here, exactly when they arrived in this country, but we can't find out anything about any cars that actually are owned by anybody. Seems rather strange, but that's the way we are.
Yeah.
Well, look, this is a fascinating story. I'm so glad that you guys came over here today, and I'm going to have to get out on Woodward and check out and see the car firsthand for myself.
Definitely give you a tour.
Logan, thanks so much for coming on the show. This has been a great story. And Mark, great having you back, too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to let these guys go, bring in a couple of my other colleagues, and we'll talk about some of the news of the week, and we'll be back in just a moment.